Buenas tardes a todos. Primero que nada, pues agradecerle a los Ponchos, a Angie, a todo el equipo de Casa de Arquitectura, a nuestros amigos del gobierno del estado por este regalo de Congreso. La verdad es que ha sido una experiencia magnífica y muchísimas gracias. Y después, pues tengo el honor de presentar a Tham Videgård, que es un despacho fundado en Estocolmo hace 25 años, en 1999. Tienen un volumen de obra impresionante de todo tipo de escala y tipología, tanto local como internacional. Y me puedo echar aquí media hora contándoles todas sus premios, bienales, exposiciones y publicaciones, aparte de que voy a pronunciar mal la mitad. Así que mejor aprovecho el tiempo cediéndoles la palabra para que nos hagan favor de compartirnos algo de su magnífico trabajo. Martín.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting us, Poncho and the team. Everybody, we've been well hosted here, so having a good time here in Mexico. We have plenty of projects to show you, a lot of images, so we can jump into this directly, I think.
Yeah, right. So I'm Bolle, this is Martin. We started working together, actually, the office started 25 years ago, but it's 30 years, more or less, since we had some collaborations at the school in Stockholm. And we're based in Stockholm, Sweden. So some of you know it already, but well, Sweden is 10 million people. It's 2,500 kilometers. So we usually say that if you take the southern tip of Sweden, you just turn it down, you arrive in Rome. So it's a rather long country, also with European measures. We were going to start just talk a little bit about where we come from and sort of what has inspired, all of our projects, but especially the first ones. This is an image of Stockholm, and it sits in the archipelago. So that would be central Stockholm. And then if you travel like 15 minutes with a car, you're already in the archipelago. So as you can imagine, and actually the lakes continue inland as well. So as you can imagine, if you live in Stockholm, you're always close to nature and close to the sea. And this is basically the circle that we had. That's the old town. And this is our office in the southern part, southern central part.
And this image we usually show, it's an old barn from the 17th century in the north of Sweden. And we show this because architecture is about inherited knowledge accumulated over centuries. And we're sort of a part of that. And we try to learn from the history. We don't have to invent anything. We can just take care of what's already invented. So we have been looking thoroughly into the masters, but also into this kind of vernacular architecture, which is locally rooted, and we find an interest in local contexts. And this building sort of shows how a building can be built without architects. It's fairly pragmatic in that sense that the material of the house is the forest behind. The location of the building is on a dry spot, is facing the sun, because in Sweden we want to face the sun rather than avoid the sun. And the length of each log is as long as 2 men can carry. All the joints are like all the whole building is made out of just one axe. So it's super simple in that sense. And it's all linked together by gravity. No joints with metallic parts or whatever. So it's very simple in that sense. And as you can see, the shape of the building is also pragmatic in trying to create as a big void as possible with as little material as possible. And but on the parallel to that, we can see that the carpenters put a joy in trying to make something beautiful. This symmetry and this organization of the whole building is something that you can cherish and appreciate.
Yeah, and the super direct relationship between the site, the material that is sourced on the site, basically put together, And then, as Martin mentioned, the notion of something else. Something is not just necessary, it's not just pragmatic, it's also beautiful. And the feel of the red color that protects the wood, and of course the texture of the wood, etc., adds to that. So this represents context and sort of a very being very careful with the resources. Another theme that we find crucial to every project is the idea of space in relation to construction and program. So with the Lingotto in Turin as an example, the radius of how a car turned dimensioned the size of the ramps and the size of the void in the middle. And of course, the structure is exposed. It's made in a super efficient way, but also like the other image, it definitely shows that someone took joy in producing the construction drawings for this space. And you could also say that it's one idea, one architectural gesture that solves many things at the same time. It produces space, movement, the light, etc.
So those parts that we call the operative elements of architecture consists of structure, light, and these sort of elements that constitutes the expression. And together with the idea of analyzing the local context or the global context for that sense is the starting point for us in every project.
And so the first project is, it's about 20 years ago that we started, and it's in the archipelago in Stockholm. And the archipelago used to be a place for farmers and fishermen, so it was a place of work, not leisure. But some 100 years ago, maybe 150, turn of the last century, something happened, and the bourgeoisie of Stockholm and people that had suddenly found time to spend with their families and just for vacation and joy, they started building something else and started using the archipelago for, recreation and rest. And this is an example, a very typical example of a building that would sit quite on a prominent site, perhaps on a peninsula or a big rock, sort of looking out over the water. And when we arrived at this island and with this client, we felt that the tradition of the first building that was just very simple and pragmatic had something very nice about it, because you could also move the building. If times changed, if there was unrest or war or something, which happened many times in this part of Sweden, you could basically demount your building and move it to another place. And the landscape would remain untouched, right? Because it just sat on those small stones.
So we had this as a starting point to create something that doesn't leave a trace, so to say. We didn't want to excavate or transform the nature, and that's one of the main reasons why you go there, just to explore the nature. So we found a flat spot between two boulders, two granite rocks. One is over here and the other one is here. So we had a flat space in the middle here that we wanted to use. Still, we wanted to create a relation to the horizon and the water. So this slightly parallelogram thing, which is not parallel to the water, we zigzagged it to create this sort of frontal relation to the horizon.
And that became the DNA of this project, where the outside and the inside merges. And as you can imagine, the horizon is always present as you move along the interior of the house, and that terrace outside kind of doubles the social space of the building.
And the horizontal trellis is sort of enclosed the parallelogram, but it also creates this horizontal trellis that doesn't take away the views, but it diffuses the light, creating a more soft light when you're inside and creating this outdoor space.
And the client wanted basically two houses. One house for the young family at the time, and a separate building for the mother-in-law. We found out that, well, we wanted to maximize this sort of social space, and since the mother-in-law wasn't always there, we thought that, well, this could be the wing, and with a partition, she could spend her time here if they didn't want to socialize all the time. Otherwise, the kitchen, the living, and the master bedroom kind of made a sequence altogether, and depending on how you use the sliding doors, you could more or less see this whole space, including the terrace, as one continuity.
And well, a couple of images of the inside, but it was quite a struggle for the carpenters to do this. They traveled all the material by boat, and they stayed in a small hut for weeks, working all the time. It's such a remote place. This takes like 3 hours by boat, by a fairly quick boat, to go to the Stockholm center.
And the logic of the building is, as we mentioned, that it's a light building. You can carry everything with 2 people from the boat up onto the site. And then that drawing just showed the details of this combination of solid wood and cross-laminated panels that are dyed black and that are used in different ways depending on which part of the facade it is.
And this project was also a starting point for us to get more assignments in the archipelago, doing those summer houses for private clients. That was the beginning of our practice, so to say. So we did a couple of those, especially on islands with the same principles of doing lightweight structures in wood. Then we also had a couple of other projects to show that we're on the mainland, but still in the archipelago, so to say. That we got more options. We could work in concrete and more heavy materials, and the sort of pragmatism or analysis of the site is the sort of leads us the way in how the architecture should look like.
So there's a gradual evolvement in these projects from something that is pure wood, pure sort of 2 people transport from the sea, to something that sits on a base like this building, but it's still the idea of something like a tent, like one space, something, the most simple way you can sort of establish a place on an island. So something that is reachable with the car, as Martin mentioned, and then following that logic, we could also try other ways of relating to the landscape, like this building that sits more at the coast, like a series of boathouses, or this building that sits on a rather high hill and is more of a lantern or a lighthouse.
So, okay, this is a totally different project up in the very far north of Sweden, close to the polar circle. A totally different landscape, a remote place where nobody really lives, apart from just a few. But it's a very popular area to go to experience the sort of wild nature, this beautiful landscape up in the north. And we got this assignment to design a small tree hut, and we started thinking about this location and this sort of contradictory or the what do you say, the paradox in when you go there, it's harsh, it's cold. You bring all the most advanced gears that we have invented, like Kevlar, Gore-Tex, cell phones, just to be able to survive. And that paradox, wanting to experience the wild nature, the sort of naturalistic experience in relation to this Gore-Tex and high-tech feeling, was an intriguing paradox that we wanted to explore. So we ended up in a proposal, a quick sketch, just a box centered on a tree trunk, 4 times 4 times 4 meters, a mirroring box that just reflects the surrounding, doesn't cultivate the land. It's just an abstraction. We didn't want to build a sort of typical hut here. We wanted to go further or beyond that. And this very quick idea was shown to the clients who had this small hotel up there, and they were surprisingly quite excited, and they wanted us to explore this.
Yeah, so we were at first quite surprised that they wanted to go ahead because it seemed so outrageous in a way. But then we just went ahead, and this place, Harads, this small village, is about 200 people, so it's something that you pass along one of the main rivers in the north of Sweden. And still, they had a lot of local know-how. So this entire project was built with them. The program was super simple. It's one hotel room. We had the idea that you should actually climb up to the hotel with a rope ladder. In the end, as you could see on the previous image, it was more of a rope bridge, sort of connecting to the ground through a couple of trees. And it has this double height space and also a sunken terrace that is hidden. And these are some studies that we made early on.
And this fairly direct idea was kind of complicated to realize, but we contacted a couple of engineers that we knew of. One was really good in wood, and the other one was really good in lightweight constructions, since the tree has to bear is the load-bearing structure, the tree trunk itself. And it was manufactured with local skills, local carpenters and welders, and this is the occasion where they put one of the pieces, it's made in two pieces, mounted together around the tree. The tree is not perforated, it's still alive. Just clamp along the tree trunk and stabilize the tree with a couple of wires.
Yeah, so the only thing we had to add, apart from the clamps holding the box onto the tree, was these wires that stabilize for winds or moving inside. If you start a party inside, there's no swinging.
And this was kind of a rare project in that sense that we had to invent quite a lot. Nobody has done this before, so we realized quite late in the project that birds might fly into this mirroring facade, but we proposed to screen print ultraviolet color, visible for birds but invisible for men, and then laminate it into the glass panes. And the problem with birds hasn't aroused. So that's one of those small inventions or unconventional ideas that we explored during the process.
And it's open year round. And this project is probably our smallest project, but it's also probably the most communicated, or it's been published everywhere. And it's funny because this site, I mean, as I told you, is 200 people. It's, I mean, if you're kind, you could say it's the start of one of the main routes up into the mountains of northern Sweden. So it's a good place to start if you like hiking. Otherwise, it's not a place where you go. But what happened was that through the publicity, people started coming from all over the world, and Brangelina at the time, and the sister of Beyonce, what's her name again? Solange, is it? Yeah. I mean, they've been here doing workshops with their children, and it's funny because it's really a struggle to go here. You need to go to Stockholm, which is quite far, as we know, and then you need to go another flight and then drive a car for a couple of hours. So it's quite interesting.
Okay, now we're to the south of Sweden again, like a couple of hundred or 1,000 kilometers away from the Tree Hotel. This is a totally different setting, and the site is spectacular in that sense. It's one of the few ones that faces the water. It's very close to the water, and it's an agricultural area. But the site itself was like a small, like leftover botanic garden, so to say, or forgotten botanic garden. Really beautiful, as you can see, with a lot of flowers and greenery, and a small creek running through the parcel. So we felt that this is kind of delicate. We have to work in a very delicate way to handle this. On the other hand, we were thinking out on what kind of material can we use, and this specific area is known for its brickwork. Sigurd Leverand's work is very close to this point, and we looked at the Klippen Church, of course, as a reference, and we got to know that there was an old barn that was going to be torn down. So we had this idea of reusing the bricks and reassemble them on site, but it didn't turn out that way, since the brick had to stand moisture and flooding, and it wasn't really possible. But we still use the idea of using bricks.
And so the layout became sort of a combination of organic architecture, but still, as you see, very geometrical. But each block, each brick, if you like, is placed. So each room is one unit, and they are placed across the site and also across the creek in a way not to interfere with some of the most important trees and flowering bushes. And this is how the layout turned out, with the entrance as a bridge across the creek. You enter from here across and then this way. From there you reach the kitchen, which is a bit unusual because it's also the sort of central hall of the project. So you use the kitchen to access the master suite, the living room. This is the sauna and the guest room. And then there's a separate sitting room and the children's room over here. And you move rather like within a landscape or something. It's not the most direct way of moving. It's not the most efficient, but it's very social, which is of course something that is possible with a vacation home or something that you use when you're not under pressure or not sort of have to be super efficient every minute.
So this concept of sort of dissecting the program and reassemble it and trying to keep as much greenery as possible was kind of successful and led to this sort of organic shape. Inside you have different vaults creating different directions. So if you move from one volume to another, the directions of the vaults changes, and each room has more or less 3 or 4 possible views towards the outside. So it's very much you get the sense that you're inside, but still you get a very strong connection to the outside. The whole building is in brick, as we said, and this idea of using one material, one sturdy material, even though the form factor of this is kind of strange, it has a long facade, but the idea of using a sturdy material is something that you can argue to use when talking about sustainability, for instance. The longest still functioning building is the most sustainable one, so why not go for low-tech solutions with well-known technical well-known technical solutions.
And the brick as a measurement also gives certain opportunities, like this detail that allows the building to be ventilated even when you're not at home. So there are sort of louvers that you can open on the inside and leave them during the day, and then when you come home, it's still fresh. So it's rather sort of a passive concept. And then the bricks also are used in the entrance hall, and you get these. This is the view from the entrance hall inwards the property, and then you get these connections between rooms and the exterior. You sort of have the opportunity to look across the exterior into your own home.
And working with brick is kind of interesting because you sort of leave the metric system. You start with the brick size instead, and that's the sort of measurement. It's either a whole brick or half a brick. So it's sort of a small scale of the whole project is assembling volumes.
And this is in winter, as this is the southern part of Sweden. There is of course snow every winter, but not all the time. And very often, though, the creek floods. So, which is, I mean, the original reason why we went for a concrete and brick construction that stands some flooding. What happened? I mean, because as you saw, we still do small projects, but what happened in 2004 is that we won a competition for this museum, and that opened up the opportunity for us to be invited to other competitions and more public work, another scale. And today we are 30 people or 32 in the office, and Martin and I, we always work together on every project, but of course with larger teams. But we still sort of keep that size. I spoke to someone, some of our colleagues here, and the fact is that though Sweden is a rather small country, we have huge offices. So there are offices with 500 people or even 700 perhaps, with locations across. So we are still like a medium size, but as you might guess, those are the people that we compete with all the time.
But we're trying to be as small as possible, and the assignments or the competition wins are the ones that sort of defines the size of the company. But it's nice to not be bigger than 30, because then you're still just one group. You're sitting in one large space.
Yeah.
And about competitions, we got, as Bolle said, invited to more public competitions, larger programs, and we were fortunate to win 2007 the competition of a new school of architecture, and the school that we went to, we're about to move and be a part of the campus, the KTH campus, which is this area, which is kind of vast, several different buildings, and the location was this. It's a triangular courtyard together with this existing building. The setting is very beautiful. It's all built, or more or less all built in the early 20th century. This beautiful brick architecture that it's really hard to cope up with.
And one of the things we observed was that, I mean, within a campus, the logic is that, at least it was, that each institution would have their own building. So it's like a mind map in a way. And what's interesting with that is that you can move in many different ways through the main axis or the original system, or like meandering up to here, and it actually expands up even further. And this idea of having each institution in a very clear building, and that you would meet in the streets or in the passageways and alleys within the campus, and that things happen when different kinds of knowledge sort of interact, was a starting point for us, which is also why we focused on making a building within this narrow triangular site that would still be freestanding. So there would have been an option to connect it to this. That's the new info center that we also refurbished. But we wanted it to be like the home of the architects. And ourselves, we appreciate it very much when you come to a different town or a different place and you arrive at the School of Architecture. It's a building. It's not like part of a large galleria or something.
So this narrow triangular site was the starting point for us, and we started to offset the neighboring facades, creating sort of strange shape with parallel or straight lines. But we realized that if we start to curve this, making it like a continuous curve, the visual impact was totally different. It just around the corner, it just faded away around the corner, so to say. So it appeared much smaller in this very dense situation. So the curve becomes sort of a vehicle for us to work with. Parallel to this, we were thinking about what kind of material we would use, and the brickwork, as we mentioned before, was really expensive and hard to measure up with. So we proposed this corten steel, which has the same heaviness to the brick and also blends well color-wise into this context. And the curves, as you can see, were the sort of overruling concept, both for the exterior but also for the interior. And it was kind of successful when we worked on this and they changed the program slightly, we could just adjust the curves according to that. And we worked on this for several years and it was kind of complex and had a lot of iterations, especially regarding the inside.
And the organization of the school is very simple. I mean, this is the most public parts. We had the idea that everyone should be able to access every floor, so it would be like an open interior. You didn't have to be a teacher to reach the top. So there are roof terraces at the top. There are these studio levels that are open all around, so that actually you can imagine that the space is rather defined by the surrounding walls, the surrounding buildings. And then, of course, you could also move through the building and reach the courtyard. This is the workshop, wooden workshops and sort of 3D workshops, and move up through the courtyard level again. So there's also like hidden routes within the building.
And this, I can just mention the bigger rooms, the assembly rooms, are set in a souterrain level, so they are double height and getting light from the story above. So the mezzanine is sort of have a lot of cutouts to create light deep inside the building.
And yeah, to use the space as much as we could, we had to put all the technical equipment below the building. So the first action during construction was to do like a 10 or 12 meter deep pit for all the technical equipment. And underneath this surface is the workshop that is given light through that small atrium. And yeah, so the building it's a bit like an iceberg. It sort of uses everything available almost up until the facade of the surrounding buildings, and then the floors above ground are used only for sort of primary spaces. And as Martin mentioned, the curves sort of allows the building to appear shorter and smaller than it really is. And at the top, you have these huge windows that sort of marks a couple of like main meeting spaces and an open office for workshops.
And regarding sustainability and energy consumption, this sort of almost rounded shape has a very good form factor in that sense. And we had to apply to the highest LEED and BREEAM regulations, and we were able to do that due to this form factor.
Where we went to school in the old school of architecture, that was like one of the most hated buildings in Stockholm. It was like by the inhabitants, it was voted the ugliest building in Stockholm every year. It was a kind of structuralist, kind of late modern building, very nice actually, but everything was sort of exposed and very direct. And we think that is interesting, of course, for a school of architecture, that you use it as a reference. I mean, that's you can't avoid that. If you're a student, you spend time, you spend hours and nights there, so you will eventually look quite closely to everything. And so the structure is exposed in this building as well. And as you saw, these wooden panels are the only thing that sort of adds and also handles acoustics and stuff like that. But it also works as an atelier space so that you can nail your presentation to the wall. It's not a problem. You don't have to repaint it. It's okay. And then when you arrive to the third or fourth level of the building, you start to connect to Stockholm, because the whole campus sits on a slight slope. So we thought that's, of course, fantastic for a school of architecture to have that sort of feedback, looking back at the city.
Yeah, we have a couple of more projects, so perhaps we should just move forward.
Yeah. We do it next.
We have a lot of images on this.
Yeah, and now it's been around for about 10 years, and we can just say that, as with every institution, what you can be sure of is that it's not going to be used the way that the client thought it's going to be used, but over every 5th or 10th year, it's going to be changed. The dean is changed, the head of the school, the curriculum, etc. But so that's an experience that we took also to this project. We're going to show you two ongoing projects, both in Gothenburg, and both the result of competitions a few years ago.
And this one is, we're actually handing in the construction drawings next week. So it's been a long journey coming here. And the location is quite amazing and intimidating in a way. It's the very center of Gothenburg. This is their main square. Everybody knows about it. It's at the end of the main avenue, ending up with cultural institutions. And our location is close to this. But in the beginning, the main idea with this project was to assemble all the different cultural institutions into one building, because they were scattered around the city. And we had at the beginning this whole area to work with, trying to investigate what's possible and what's not, and where to locate the new building. And we made some sort of mapping on this, trying to identify what are the most valuable areas, what are the sort of areas that we could sort of change in a bit, looking at the flows. And we realized that this part, which was a parking lot, was possible to use. We were able to tear down an old volume over here and replace it with a much bigger one, and trying to create something that's linked to the existing school of dance and music. So altogether, there will be a school for dance and music, art, design, and so forth.
And yeah, with this location, as you can see, we added a wing, you could say, along the street that sort of supports the street space. And then this cubicle volume also that sort of sits on the second row, you could say, completing the space that houses the city theater, the concert hall, and the museum and the Kunsthal. So it's a perfect location, of course, for a school of art, design, and music.
And the volume actually sort of heals a scar in the city fabric. It's a perimeter block city, as you can see, and this street wasn't really defined, and the square was more like you looked into a void with a parking lot over here, and those two volumes sort of adds the logic of the existing city. Well, this is the image where you see the art museum, which actually was a competition just recently that Sveriges won, an edition that will be behind this one. And this is our volume that appears slightly, here you can see it more clear, this sort of cornerstone adding to the existing cultural buildings, defining the square in a more sort of dense way.
And the facades and materials sort of take the clue of their neighbors. So along the street, it's a red brick, while the cubicle volume is light sand-colored concrete that sort of resembles the light brick architecture of the neoclassical buildings around the main square. As mentioned with the School of Architecture, one thing you know when you start a project like this is that the spaces are going to be used in different ways over the years. So what we strove for was to find a structure with good spaces where you could basically put anything from art, design, and the only things that had to be quite defined was, this is also including a metro station, workshop, and some of these spaces, some of the music spaces, they are not possible to move around, of course. So there's a mix of tailored spaces and spaces that are very generic.
But what you were after was that we opted for a generic solution, generic spaces, large and small, that could function in many different ways over the time. That was the sort of main idea with our proposal.
At the main level, you will have the new main entrance that complements the existing main entrance, so that you have a system for connecting the whole new, well, it's an urban block, you could say. The structure of this facade also sort of it's informed by the strict order and the calm, sort of stacked logic of its neighbors, but at the same time, it's of course very different. There are some slight adjustments between every floor, and it's very open. It sort of gets lighter, so it's heavy, but it also gets lighter towards the top. So it's like heavy concrete blocks stacked on top of each other. It's like a Stonehenge, more or less, super rustic in a way. You just stack one on top of each other. And well, the color resemblance of the brick buildings, we realized that we weren't really able to work with bricks in this concept, and the need of light and large spans, open spans. Where here you see the core of the volume. Can go further. Well, here's like a quick journey through the entrance, the main stair, the atrium, and this is sort of the organization. The wing has a slightly different atmosphere. It's made out of brick and clad in wood. So this fairly big complex sort of changes if you go from one to another. And the cubical volume holds these generic spaces. At the top, there's this skylight. And of course, the corner rooms will be great. Again, they appear quite empty here, but that's also the idea, so that they could use it as office spaces or classrooms or workshops, or even rehearsals. So the final product we're going to show you is a high-rise competition we won in 2009 that we're still working on, and it's quite close to the former project. Yeah, it's actually the site is here for the other project. This is before, yeah. And the site is kind of interesting because if we go further, it sits on the border of the older perimeter block city, and facing the more open and informal area where you have recreation areas and large auditoriums, and our project was to create a main entrance for the fair, the biggest fair in Northern Europe, and a tower on top of this that would hold 400 hotel rooms. And the thing that we proposed was that we want to strengthen or relate to the perimeter blocks, establish this height, and on top of that, creating this tower. And it's like the Gordon Bunshaft lever house, having this sort of plinth and a high-rise on top of it. It creates a good possibility to, on one hand, prevent from vertical winds that are always present when you have a high-rise, but it also made it possible for us to open it up, so it's more or less an outdoor space. So those canopies, they shelter from the rain, but it creates this sort of large openings where you can stay, and it's also facing the south, so it's a really nice possibility to be at that site. And so, yeah, the idea was then to allow this building to, from afar, stand out. It will be a new point of reference within Gothenburg. But when you're moving on the street, you will draw the reference to that 5 or 6 story height of the old city. It's sort of sitting on this road that holds, as you can see, there's an amusement park, which is also the biggest, I think, in Sweden. There's this fair, there's an ice hockey arena, there's a huge football arena, but that is also used for all the biggest concerts. So you have really large flows of people here. What happens is that those public spaces at ground level where we allow the building to be set back, it will be used or very useful, because that's where you will have like thousands of people coming to reach the new subterranean metro station that is below ground here, which is also the reason why this project that we already worked for in 5 years will be another 5 years or so, because until we can access the ground. And this is just a study we did to show how, for the municipality, how it will be visible. And as Martin mentioned, the motif of the veranda is something that works well in Gothenburg, because on the west coast of Sweden it rains all the time. So and it's also quite windy. So the veranda is something that they've had as a theme or something, as a kind of space that they used. And this is from the Jubilee exhibition. Gothenburg turned 300 years as a city in 1921, actually, but the exhibition was in 23. So now it's about 400 years. And we took inspiration, of course, of these kind of festive and open spaces that would also work during, well, rainy days.
Well, we don't have to go in detail on how it all works, but it has this sort of big entrance open for different settings, because every fair has its own theme, and it's sort of differs all the time. But it also works as the main entrance for the hotel.
And the unique thing, of course, with the tower is that you will have views. And as this sits high above, I mean, there's not many towers close to this one that is so high. So we will have very wide views. And the part of that is one of the keys of the project was to develop a system together with Bureau Happold, where we could have as clear glazing as possible. So like kind of a passive system, where a system of glazing and curtains would be, let's say, like a low-tech version of control air or heat control.
Because either you can have reflective glass with no see-through that protects the facade or the building from the sun heat, or as we opted for, the sort of unintelligent glass that's just pure glass planes untreated, where you pour in all the heat, but it reflects out through the curtains. So because it's an open membrane, so it goes both ways. And we calculated on this quite a bit together with Bureau Happold, and they realized that okay, we get some extra heat, but we still want to. We are able to reuse it. We can preheat the pools or other spaces that need heat. And all in all, with the extra cooling that needed, it was more energy efficient compared to more sort of traditional way. And it also sort of impacted the architecture and the appearance of the building, since it becomes sort of a see-through transparent glass building instead of this mirroring box.
And the sort of pillar slab system of the veranda is continued through the building. And as you can see, there's like a horizontal every second, so that the building is, for the eye, it's not so many floors, and then those vertical pillars are prolonged to create this forest of columns at the top, and that will be possible to visit. It's not like a viewing platform, but it will be possible to go there for special events. But it's also part, of course, of the identity of the building, and something that will solve both the issue, of course, that the building has to have some kind of light at the top, so for air security, but also in relation to concerts or other events in the city, it will be programmed. So a bit like the Empire State, where you have different coloring, etc.
And high rises are kind of delicate in that sense that it sort of it creates an impact of the whole city, and there's the roof, the contour, and the roofscape. You can see it from afar. So, but we also have the responsibility to create nice situations in the actual street down below. So this sort of division of having the base, the tower, and the crown, so to say, at top, creates this sort of communicates on different levels. And this part would be realized in a couple of years from now, and we're That's on our drawing table at the moment.
Thank you.
And yeah, that's the last image.